Testing from far away, doo-dah, doo-dah. Oops, near-death experience caught on camera. Hello everybody, I am back in the US of A, in Wisconsin, after a long, arduous, almost 5 months abroad in Europe. And I am back now with my second annual year recap. I got to see the Percy Jackson Lightning Thief musical for a college production in Minnesota, and it was fantastic. I've never actually read the books. I read them after this, actually. So my introduction to Percy Jackson was through the musical, which is, I feel like, super rare. And now obviously the TV show is coming out soon. So I'm actually really excited about that now. Another musical I seen this, I actually went back to my high school and I watched their production of Shrek the Musical. It was pretty good. I got to bring Colin and Adrian with me to my high school and show them around my town, which was actually the more fun part of the whole event, I think. But they did do a pretty good job, and I got to talk to some of the actors afterwards and be like, we're college kids, we know what we're talking about. Because Adrian is actually a really good actor, Colin's really good stage manager, and I do lighting, set, and stage managing. So March, I did quite a bit, actually. I got my hair redone for the first time of the year. I usually only do it once, but I got it done twice this year. We'll get to that. And then I also had my birthday. For my birthday, I got my wide-angle lens, which I'm not actually using right now. I'm hoping to be getting another lens pretty shortly here, so that's pretty fun as well. And for my 19th birthday, I got to go see May Day Parade. A band I've loved since I was so young and in my intense emo phase, which I'm still in, let's be real. I got to see May Day and it was so cool. This was the first concert I've ever been to in Pitt. I just wanted to go so bad, and it was right around my birthday. I think it was like 2 or 3 days off. So yeah, I got to go to Minneapolis and see May Day, and I think I ended up in like 5th row, and it was really, really great. And I got this really awesome picture of Derek, which I'm never gonna stop thinking about. I miss them, I love them. The other great thing about this month is that I accidentally ended up going to see Crank Gameplay's tour. I went with my friend Amy, who was already going, and I found out she was going, and I jokingly was like, I want to go, and she was like, hey, I could pick you up. So I got seats super last minute, like the day before, and I ended up going with them, and we had a great time. Oh my god. As a show, being a theater kid, it wasn't anything spectacular, but I just loved seeing E again, and any of you who know me more well might know that I actually have known Ethan since way before he was famous. I met him a couple times. I used to have him on Snapchat. Next up we have lovely April. In April, I got to see 2 more Broadway plays. This was one professionally done in Minneapolis, and I got to see the prom through a school program, and then I got to see Cabaret performed at my college, which I got to help with the lighting on a little bit, but Adrian, who I've mentioned many times before, was actually the lead. Our production of Cabaret, which was really amazing getting to go and support her, especially because I think we were still freshmen at this time, so her having a lead role was kind of a big deal, and she did great, and it's such like an opposite role from her and her personality. Like, she's literally a cottagecore fairy in real life. And in April, I also got to shoot my first senior portraits for my old friend Kyan. I'm gonna toss some of those photos up here because I like them a lot, and I think they turned out absolutely gorgeous, and they are stunning. My first real recommendation of this video is Heartstopper. I had a hyperfixation on Heartstopper for about 4 weeks this year. Watched the entire show 8 times in 1 week. And then I read all the novels in 2 days. They're graphic novels, so that's nothing too extreme. But I did, in fact, do that. May was the last couple weeks of this semester, so obviously things were winding down. We had finals. It was really a chill month though. This was my like 2-month little break before having an incredibly hectic next couple of months. So yeah, and then I did a lot more photography this month because I had the time, which is, as you know, the best thing you can have as a creative person is time to ruminate on projects. Speaking of chill months, next up we have June, where it was just a lot of planning and prep and photography stuff. And on the same photography route, this is the month I started getting into astrophotography, which is a theme that followed me for a couple months. And then lastly from June, I got to go to my first of 3 Renaissance fairs this year with a friend from kindergarten who moved away for about 12 to 13 years, and I found randomly online. And now for July, my last normal month of the year. July 4th weekend, when I had Logan, Jaden, and Lexi up to my little neck of the woods, and I brought them all around my hometown. We had a little campfire 4th of July party. We watched fireworks together. We went to a museum together. We went to a couple of restaurants, and then we went hiking at the Pothole Park, and I have a video about that somewhere as well. That was a really good weekend and really fun time. Something else that had been happening simultaneously at this time is that this was probably our 3rd or 4th week of doing online D&D, which essentially was just, I think, what ended up being 4 to 6 sessions during the summer where I got together with my D&D team and played with them all online. Because we got to add a new member in Colin's temporary absence, where we added in a new friend of mine, Haley, who is an absolute sweetheart, who also loves all things fantasy and Dungeons & Dragons, and she's watched just as much Critical Role as me, which is saying something. I also went to my second Ren Fair this month, which was Ren in the Glen. This was my first time going to Ren in the Glen, and it was so cool. It was like a Ren Fair, but very vendor-centric, and it was just so lively, and everyone there was so talkative and nice, and you could tell the community was so strong, because you could tell it was just a bunch of local Midwestern geeks in the middle of, like, nowhere, Wisconsin. The end of this month is also when I start thinking about wanting to learn to sew or do leather work. So I'm just gonna slide that into this video because it is one of my goals for next year, and I'm just putting it here that July of 2022 is when the idea first started ruminating up in my skull. Now we have August. In August, I got to do, first and foremost, one of my favorite things in the world, Gish. Apparently, Misha, I'm looking at you, this is probably the last year of Gish, or at least the last year for quite some time, which makes me so sad because I love doing Gish, and I've been doing it for like 5 years now. But I will share my favorite Gish creations because I had some really cool ones this year, and I think from a stats perspective, I think this was the second best I've ever done. And I had mostly the same team as last year, and I loved my team last year, and I had a great time. Farewell Gish, I will Gish you. I redid my hair for the second time because I was leaving in approximately 2 weeks by this point to go abroad to study. Lexi picked me up and I got to hang out with the Bone Gals one last time as we went to Minnesota Renaissance Fair, the big Renaissance Fair, the first time with our whole group, sans Colin, and we all went, and it was an interesting day. I was having an anxiety attack the whole time. Jaden had something going on. Lexi almost had heat stroke, and Adrian got stung by a bee. Somehow meet Nate Hardy at Ren Fair, if you know who this is. Well, let's just say Sam and Colby fans will know who this is. Having your best friends dress up in fantasy costumes and go stroll around a park even when you're all feeling like shit together, just like commiserating with each other and like experiencing that vibe and energy. Nothing like it in the world. The next day I went with Lexi to her city and she showed me around there for 2 days before we had our flight to Edinburgh. This 2-week period following, if you know already, was not great for me. I had severe ear problems, which caused severe equilibrium and balance problems that lasted for almost a month. Arriving to Scotland, it's such a beautiful country. It's unreal. It is like a fairy tale everywhere you go. Edinburgh is a beautiful and complex city. Of all the cities I went to, I think Edinburgh is definitely in my top 3. And then I also got to visit Falkirk with Lexi, and I think we were like the only group in our whole program to go to Falkirk, and I honestly just loved it. Falkirk was just a joy of a like small, almost sleepy town with just this rich historical culture, and also it is the land of Kelpies, which have a mix of the industrial history of Scotland as well as the folklore of Scotland with the Kelpies themselves, which was just a really cool monument and like park to walk through. Falkirk also My initial reason for going was the first place of 3 that I got to meet one of my online friends. I met Lizzie here, who is from Germany, and I got to hang out with her twice throughout the trip, but this was the first day. We basically just went out to eat and talked for a couple hours before she took us back to the train station, and we went home. Talking about the lovely September. September was great, and I think probably, honestly, thinking real hard about this, maybe the best month of my abroad program, but September was probably the happiest month for me. I got to go to Linlithgow and Linlithgow Cathedral and Palace. I got to go to Blackness Castle for our first big trip. I got to go to Ireland and meet my other online friend, Bo, and oh my god, I've known Bo for like 5 years, and getting to meet them was such a pleasure. Loved Dublin. We ate at so many cool places here. I think at this point, because it was still pretty early on in our overall trip, we were spending money a bit more freely, and we went to a lot of expensive places to eat in Dublin, and the food was so amazing everywhere we went. We went to this one restaurant, accidentally, it was way more expensive than we anticipated, called Copper Alley Bistro, and I had this sandwich that is the best sandwich I've ever had in my entire life. Like, other fun things we did in Dublin, we went to the Viking Museum, we did a Dublin nighttime like ghost tour, which was super fun. One of the coolest trips we got to do the entire trip, in my opinion anyway, was our day going to St. Abb's Head and to North Berwick. St. Abb's Head is where New Asgard is filmed for Marvel, and we got to walk around the town. It's a gorgeous, tiny seaside town, and their information center had a bunch of like Marvel stuff and like Thor props. We did North Berwick later in that day and got to go to the Seabird Conservatory and got to go on a boat tour out to this big rock and see a ton of birds. October for me started out pretty amazing and went downhill and uphill, and it was kind of just a month that kind of went like this for me. October, I had my 3-day Isle of Skye bus and hostel tour. If you have a chance to go to Skye in your lifetime, of my entire almost 5 months traveling Europe, of the like 5 countries I went to, I think Skye is what I would recommend the most. Just take a bus tour and just go to Skye. On the bus ride in, cried because of how pretty it was. I couldn't believe anything was real. It's the reason fairy tales are based off of Scotland is North Scotland and the islands and Skye. I don't have words for it because it was that cool. Like, it was a life-changing experience going up to Skye and just seeing nature in that raw form that is unlike anything else on Earth. In October, we also had our 10-day trip, which meant that I got to hop on over to Copenhagen, Denmark, and meet my oldest online friend of this trip, Anna. I've known Anna for like 8 years. I met her at least 7 years ago, and I stayed at her house for like a full 4 or 5 days, and her family treated us so well. We went out and ate with them, we went to museums with her, we explored the city together. Anna is an absolute sweetheart of a human being. She was so kind and nice, and her family was just so kind to us and helped us so much and just supported us, and we're such a lovely household to be a part of for that brief little bit of time. Denmark was lovely because of that. After Copenhagen, we went up to Norway. We stayed in Oslo because the other cities didn't have good flights in, and the ones that were extremely, extortionately expensive. Oslo is a sleepy, weird little city. We had a strange experience there. Our last day was very nice, but our first 2 days were very slow, cold. We didn't have much to do. The city is like so empty for how massive it is. It's just a strange place. And on our last day there, we actually made some like brief, like one-off friends in a hostel, as you do when you're traveling, if you know, you know. And we talked to them for like an hour about the city, and we all had the exact same experience despite being completely different travel journeys. We were all like, Oslo is like a strange town that is like, it doesn't represent Norway. Like, if you're gonna go to Norway, I recommend, from what I've heard and from what I want to do, to go to North Norway, or even Bergen. I want to go to Trondheim really bad. The last day was super cool. We got to go to the Polar Fram Museum and the Tiki Museum. to was we went to a lot of Viking museums and pirate stuff, and it was just super cool to learn about all that. And the museums, as a side note, the museums in Europe are infinitely better than any museum I've ever been to in the States. Yeah, Norway was a good example of this, but however, Sweden was even better. Sweden had the best museums I've ever been to. Sweden is the country from our entire trip that I actually want to go back to the most, because we only got to do about half of the things I wanted to do in Sweden. Went to Stockholm, obviously. Sweden's so cool. The Old Town District, the museums there. This is where I got to see Vasa, which is the world's oldest, like fully recovered ship remains from, I believe, the 1600s. And it is just the coolest, most niche museum I've ever been into. I read every single plaque. Every museum we went to, I tried to read as much as I could because it was such a learning opportunity. And I don't know, something about Stockholm, it's a beautiful city, rich culture, beautiful buildings and history. Swedish meatballs also, they hit different. Other things that happened this month is I got back on my musical grind. I got to go to Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat in Edinburgh Playhouse, which, that show's odd. Very amazing cast. The singing was fantastic. The costume design, amazing. One of the best sets. It's like an Egypt scene specifically that I'm thinking of that is amazing on stage, as well as the costume design for the main character. But I didn't know it before going to it, and it lost me entirely in the second act. Didn't follow it well. And then because I was getting back into a theater grind, and also because the end of October is when I got into a very deep depressive slump, I got obsessively, hyperfixatedly, ADHDingly obsessed with Dear Evan Hansen for pretty much the rest of this year. Started in October, where I watched the movie like 6 times. I love that movie, by the way. Everyone gave it shit. You're wrong. I love Ben Platt. Dear Evan Hansen got me through a lot on the trip because I really related deeply to a lot of the themes and situations in that. I barely remember, honestly. A lot happened. I was a hot mess for most of it. I got to go to St. Andrews, which is a beautiful little town with some beautiful architecture and crazy history. Bonfire night happened, and I got to hang out with Megan, who is in my major and who also went on this trip, as well as see a old friend who's ironically also in my major but graduated already and had done this program in the past. Addison, I got to see her, which was cool seeing someone else. I felt like I really needed that at that point. I got to go to Book of Mormon in Glasgow, which was actually when I got to go back to Glasgow, and I went with my teacher and her family alone. A lot led up to that, but I got to go with them, and that was a cathartic little trip. And Book of Mormon is fantastic. Oh my god, guys. Book of Mormon is hilarious. I loved it a lot. I also got what's called a slip seat, which I didn't know existed, and as a theater major, I feel like I should have. But basically substitute me into like one of the only seats left in the whole building, which means it was like a quarter view seat, and I was like above the stage. So I had these crazy weird tickets, which actually were like phenomenal seats. For like less than $20, I feel like I had one of the best seats in the house. I love those seats, and I would take them again if they were offered to me. Colin's birthday was in November, and I got to have a little mini birthday celebration with him in Edinburgh, which was very pleasant. I got to go to the Camera Obscura in Edinburgh, which is cool, with him as well. I got to hang out with Lizzie one more time this month. She came to visit me one weekend when I was feeling down. Nice, it was lovely getting to see her again. I also got to see the, I'm forgetting the name, but the big massive fountain at the base of the castle. I finally got to see it after being there for a long time. In addition to this, I also had trips to Wemyss and Dunoon. I don't know if I'm pronouncing one of those right, but it's fine. And then I also went to Stirling, which is a gorgeous city with a gorgeous castle and architecture, and the layout of the city is crazy. Stirling is very pretty. I highly recommend it if you're doing more of an extended trip within Scotland. A fun little thing during this month, because I spent a lot of time alone, is that I finished Critical Role Campaign 1, which is absurd, and now I'm like almost all the way caught up to Campaign 3. I'm only behind like 3 episodes, once again on purpose, just because I don't like being caught up. Which I read yesterday that I have officially watched over 1,000 hours of Critical Role, I think, which is such a massive number, and if you can't tell, I I love Critical Role. I recommend it. This is Wildmount. I got some lovely Caleb art and Caduceus art over here. The last fun thing about November is that I got to go to the city that I was most looking forward to, which means that I ended the very last days of November into December with going to London. In London, I got to see Hamilton. I got like fantastic seats to Hamilton for like, and from like an American comparison for like very, very cheap, like crazy, like $60 USD. I got like mid-section seats and it was phenomenal view, phenomenal performance, cast, so good. We had I don't know if we had a new Aaron Burr or if we had the understudy Aaron Burr, but I actually loved him. I thought he was like the best performer in the play. And then we got tickets to Wicked, but we low-key got scammed by the Apollo Victoria just a little bit. Our ticket was invalid and then they refused to help us even though we contacted them like immediately afterwards. But somehow we still contacted them and just gave them more money and then got worse seats. I understand now. Wicked is absolutely phenomenal. It might be my favorite musical I've ever seen from like a production standpoint. It blew me away. From production and story standpoint, I loved Wicked a lot. It was phenomenal getting to see it. And then we went way out of the way to go to Baker Street because I wanted to go so bad. If you know me, I'm a massive Sherlock Holmes fan. We got to go to the real Baker Street, and I spent like over $100 in the gift shop there. Like the subway station is plastered with Sherlock, which you'll see. And there's a Sherlock Holmes statue right outside the subway station. Then you turn the corner and there's the Sherlock Museum. And finally, finishing off my trip abroad in December, I am mostly just gonna list like some recommendations from this month because December was pretty tame. The biggest thing I got to do in December was for our last week. I got to go to Inverness, which is a city in Scotland North. It is the city closest to Loch Ness, aka the Loch Ness Monster, and I got to do a tour of Loch Ness, which was absolutely gorgeous. It was beautiful up there and less stressful, despite the fact we went during train strikes and had 2 separate instances of having to wait over 5 hours for transportation, not including the transportation, which was like 5 hours. So that part was awful, but while we were actually in the city for the 4 days, it was an amazing trip. Going backwards now, because I accidentally jumped the gun, during our last week in Dalkeith, I got to hang out with a bunch of people I didn't get to hang out that much during the program. During the last 2 weeks, actually. I'm just gonna give some shout outs to some amazing people from my program who really just helped me so much, and I appreciate them so much. Faith, Jordy, Megan, Ellen, Sky, Michaela, Abby. I think that's the group I need to thank, and they made my last 2 weeks quite a bit better than it honestly could have been, and it was just so nice getting to hang out and have some nice nights with them. I went stargazing with them one night. I went out with them once or twice. I went to a museum with just Megan and Jordy one day. Faith and I went to a cafe once, which was very sweet, and yeah, it helped a lot. It was very pleasant and nice. December is another month that I have some recommendations. I thought the final season of Dead to Me on Netflix was phenomenal. It was really, really genuinely good. One of the better like finales to a show I've like ever seen, I think. Everything wrapped up and concluded so nicely. The storylines came together very beautifully, and I loved it just a lot. This month also came upon my newest music obsession, at least for now, which is Lewis Capaldi. I started listening to him more just because I was in Scotland, and if you don't know, Lewis Capaldi is a Scottish singer. And yeah, he has just such a good voice. And then one of the last things I did in Edinburgh itself was I got to do the Edinburgh Vaults tour, which is like the ghost tour underneath the city in the vaults. And that was just super fun. We had a really entertaining tour guide. I got to go into this circle that supposedly holds the demon, and like no one else would do it, but I believe in ghosts very heavily. I have a lot of ghost stories from my past, and as we were leaving, our tour guide was calling out the group like, you guys all said you don't believe in ghosts besides like 3 people and no one's gonna do it. And then I was like, well, I do believe in ghosts, but I'm pretty immune to them as I like respect them and treat them properly. So I did that, and I had a whole group of like 30 adults like at me and had a 30-hour travel day in which my lovely friends picked me up in Minneapolis airport. which was so relieving and nice. My trip abroad was fantastic, but getting them to pick me up from the airport was cathartic and beautiful and sweet and made my heart just melt, and I got to spend the night at Haley's place for a day before finally going home, and I've been home for like 3 or 4 days now, and painting while home and unpacking and just de-stressing. Alrighty, to finish out the year now, I'm going to do my favorite thing, which is my music recap. Spotify obviously doesn't count December and half of November, and it's wrapped, so this would be slightly different. I'm gonna throw out there again because I would definitely have more musical stuff in here because I've been very in it the last month, especially with like Dear Evan Hansen and Ben Platt. I've been listening to Louis Capaldi, might also sneak in there. I don't think he would get all the way because it's only been the last 2 or 3 weeks, but I have been listening to a lot of Louis Capaldi. Drumroll please. My top 5 genres of 2022 are: number 5, indie pop; 4, K-pop; 3, pop punk; 2, pop; and number 1, we have modern rock. That's a fun selection this year. It's changed a little bit from last year, but not too much. Artists this year, we have, in reverse order, Fall Out Boy taking out number 5. It's insane that it's actually that low to me. BTS going to number 4. The Oh Hellos coming up into number 3, which was a very pleasant surprise. I do love the Oh Hellos, especially. Number 2, for 2 years in a row somehow, is Hozier. I don't know how that man hasn't been number 1. I feel real bad for him. I love him with my whole soul. He honestly should be my number 1 probably. And number 1 going to Mayday Parade. They are up there because I spent the entire beginning of the year getting caught up on their entire discography and their new album before going to their concert in March. Art recap. Just a carousel of art. Enjoy some of this. I have a Redbubble down below if you'd like to show any support. 2022 conclusions. So last year I ended out my video by saying that my 2 goals for this year were to travel and to create. I would say I smashed travel out of the water. I would say I did subpar to medium on the creative scale. So for 2023, keep it to 2 words, and I'm gonna make that kind of like a theme for these videos, I think. So this year was described as travel and create. Next year, I want my goals to be to learn and expand, and I'm hoping to hit 2K on YouTube this year. I really am. I don't know if it'll happen, and I'm not gonna say that's a hard set goal, but I wanted to like just keep making things and grow and expand. Grow, learn, expand. Learn, expand. That's the mantra for 2023. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm gonna talk a lot more about my travels in the future. I got a lot of ideas for videos. I don't know when they're gonna happen, I don't know how they're gonna happen, but they will. Thank you so much for watching, and Happy New Year.